Welcome to the Homeschool How-To. I'm Cheryl, and I left the life of classrooms and cubicles for home educating in the countryside. But I have no idea how to homeschool, so I interview the people who do. Join me on my quest to learn all the ways there is to homeschool. Welcome, and with us today, I have Shellbe from Florida. Shellbe was a homeschooled student herself and now homeschools her daughter. Shellbe, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to tell this story.
So let's start from the beginning. What even made your parents homeschool you in the first place?
So that's such an interesting question because since you asked me months ago to come on and talk about my story, I've been talking to my parents about this more. And my parents did not have a great experience in school themselves. And they decided to go kind of against the grain in their own lives. So they bought a sailboat. They were like 19 and 20 probably. And they bought a sailboat. And the story's really cute because my dad comes and he's like, honey, look what I got. And it was like a 21-foot sailboat. And it was like all beat up. And my mom's like, what the hell is that? And he's like, come on, we're going to go cruising. And she's like, what are you talking about? So fast forward, they cruised on boats for 30 years, 40 years, 40 years, a long time. So with that lifestyle, I was born when my mom was 25 and they just were like, we're going to homeschool. Absolutely. Because they didn't have great experiences in school. So we cruised around the Bahamas. My sister's 4 years younger than me. So we cruised around the islands and we did Calvert School, homeschooling back then. And it was really awesome. I loved it. And I felt like I learned so much. I don't want to jump to the part of, the next part where I went into public school and the transition there. But, yeah, I was always homeschooled. So
were you always living on a boat or did they have like a home that you'd go to sometimes?
No, we lived
Always
on a boat until I was 13. Mm-hmm. Well, no, actually, I correct. We had a little house on an island in the Bahamas, but I mean, that might have been, like, it should have just been a boat because it was literally, if you can imagine a little Bahamian island shack, it was all wide open. Birds would fly through, lizards were crawling on the floor. It was very Swiss Family Robinson minus the shipwreck in the beginning.
So, I mean, I have so many questions about just like, what did they do for money, if you don't mind me asking?
No, of course, that is like the number one question. It's usually, how did you get food and how did you have money? So we, and this can always be a multi-part podcast here. We can go all through all the things. But we lived a very simple life. And when you don't have, this was in the 80s, so things were different with boating then. When you don't have an electric bill, a cell phone bill, a cable bill, a car payment, then you think about how much money you don't need. So we would come to the Florida Keys, and my mom would bartend, my dad would build boats. They'd stock up the boat with food and lots of beans and rice and canned goods, and dad would do some maintenance on the boat, and then we'd take off cruising. And back then, you didn't need a passport to be in the Bahamas. They were pretty fluid, pretty easy. So we stayed there for a while without coming back. Like we'd have different stints. Then we did come back. They would just stock up the boat again. So we lived a very simple life. We caught rainwater. That's how we had water. Nowadays, boats have water makers. Back then, literally, it was just jugs or however my dad set it up. And then we fished all the time, spear fishing. My sister and I would just spend our days fishing and making little fires on the beach and cooking our food. It's crazy to think about when I tell the story now. It's really amazing.
I love it. Like that would be my son's dream to do that. Did you ever get caught in any storms?
So not too bad. I mean, by the time I moved to Florida off of the boat, I think we had counted that we had been through like 13 hurricanes. But my dad's very weather smart because, again, in the 80s, he didn't have the Weather Channel. He didn't have YouTube. We did do some boating. I did boating personally in my adult life, so that it was very different. So we had navigation. I didn't have to read the charts like my dad did. My dad can look at the sky and know exactly what the weather's doing. He used to listen to NOAA weather radio, which if anyone listening knows what that is, they can totally understand this. It's a computer generated voice. And he talks about like when he talks about the weather, it's literally coordinates and how the weather's moving. So you have to create this whole picture. So my dad was really, really great at that. So there were some times where we'd hunker down for a storm. We lived in Jamaica and we were there for the worst hurricane still on the scale. In Jamaica. We were in a house for that one though. We were just visiting. So, yeah.
So I
It's
feel
kind of
like you guys,
exhilarating.
yeah, I feel like you guys were the first unschoolers because I mean, I just can't
Yeah.
imagine with this lifestyle that you were really like your mom was like, okay, let's sit down for our book work from 8 to 12 today.
No, and I mean, I remember it being structured in a sense, probably like when I got more towards middle school, it was structured because the curriculum we had, so it was Calvert School out of Massachusetts or something. I don't remember. Maryland. I don't know. But I would actually write a paper or I would do a test and then we would mail it in, which is so funny to think now. Like we'd take the boat to the mainland, go to the post office. I'm like, geez, that would take forever. And then mail it in. And then the teacher would grade it with a red pen and then send it back to me. So whenever I've gotten asked a lot, like, well, how did you really know you were doing good, right? I'm sure us homeschool parents get that a lot. Like, but who's grading it? I mean, how do you really know? And I'm like, the curriculum is set up that way. So we would send it in and then I would get my reports back. And I always love to write. I love to read. So that was the setup. But you're right. It was very unschooled. A typical day, now granted, this is a long time ago, so I'm trying to remember exactly. A typical day would be, we just wake up and put our bathing suits on because we're on a boat. And then we just sit down and a lot of it was self-taught, because that's how homeschooling really is kind of set up the curriculum. And I remember that being even more so than what I'm running into homeschooling my daughter, more self-taught. So yeah, we would just do my parents say maybe 2 hours, maybe, but I don't know. I think parents forget what it was like 30, 40 years ago. They're like, oh yeah, we were very rigid. I'm like, no, you weren't. No. And then we would be done.
And that is a testament to what I've heard, something that one of my guests had said a while back, and it always stuck with me. They said, I wish I could remember who. They said, everything you need to know to be successful in life, you can learn in the high school years. Mm-hmm. Everything before that can be play, and you'll end up, if not farther ahead, you'll end up, just at the same, probably farther ahead. But yes, the things that like you need to know to really survive in the world, right? And I mean, you guys were surviving. You knew how to fish and build a fire and, find food and water. I mean, that's surviving. That is up until the last couple of decades. That is just how everybody survived for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah.
And, well, that might be an exaggeration. I don't know how many thousands, but at least a few thousand.
Yeah.
Like it's only recently that we have a grocery store because even I grew up with like, we didn't go to like a Price Chopper or a Walmart for groceries. There was like a corner store, and I'm in upstate New York. I went to like a city school, but we still walked around the corner to get our meats, our, vegetables, our fruit. And we probably made that trip every couple of days. So it wasn't like this one box store that you get everything at. And I mean, I'm 41. So just in my lifetime, how much that's changed. And then my mother's and my grandmother's, right. I mean, that was like, my grandmother's was like, you're growing food, you're in Poland, you're growing what you're eating. You're not going to a grocery store for much. So it's so funny that, people think the idea of homeschooling is such a foreign concept, but it's like, what do you really need to know in life? You need to know how to find food, which you learned from fishing, and how to make it and how to get a warmth and shelter. Yeah, what a beautiful way to grow up. It just you and your sister?
Yeah, and my sister and I, my younger sister. And I think that, so I will fast forward a little bit and say that I was put into public school in the middle of 7th grade. So we can get into that in a second. But I want to say the comparison, I knew life skills. Like I literally knew responsibility. And that's it's so cool that I have that and I'm able to teach my daughter that. And I watch my sister teach her daughters that. I let her do dangerous things safely. And I think we talked about this when you were on Fearless Motherhood with me. because I knew responsibility. I mean, I have pictures of myself. So I was 5 or 6, I have my little 1.5, 2-year-old sister in a little sail dinghy, and I'm just sailing around the harbor. And then when she got a little bit older, I'm going to go ahead and give my parents credit and say maybe she was like 4 and I was 8. We would sail through the harbor and we'd flip the dinghy, and the people in the harbor would say, "Oh my gosh, those kids over there, they just flipped the boat." And my parents were like, "Oh, they're fine. They do that on purpose," because we knew my dad wanted us to know how to flip it back over, with the
Oh, that's
mast and the
so
sail
great.
up. And so we knew those responsibilities. And my dad would say, if something happens with your sister, what are you going to do? Like, we learned these life skills so quickly. If the outboard dies, throw the anchor, like, immediately. And those things, I just got chills thinking of that. Those things have transpired into my life. And when I have been in situations that are, I don't know, you got to think quick. I remember those. And then I think it's beautiful too was the the bond that my family of 4 had and the trust we had in each other, because there's no time for, "Dad, I don't want to." It's like, "Did you tie up the dinghy?" "Well, maybe." "Well, I don't know." It's not that. It's yes or no. Like, that's our car, essentially. We're anchored out in a harbor. Did you tie it up? Did you tie it up properly? There's no time for BS. Like, it has to be done. And so there was that level of trust between all of us. And I think that coming back to the homeschooling aspect of that, because we were with them full time, which I think ultimately is one of the main reasons why we're homeschooling, right? So that we are teaching our children. We got to build those life skills and that bond as a family. That is, I mean, I live on the property with my parents now, not because I have to, because I want to. We have that great bond of trust and very tribal. So I think that's
Love
one of my
that.
biggest takeaways.
So why did they put you in public school in 7th grade?
Oh, drum roll. Okay, this is so my mom, this is what I think. I've thought about this a lot since you and I talked. What I think is my mom had a medical scare. We were living in the islands. She had a really bad asthma attack and had to be life flighted to Florida. And that was pretty scary for all of us, obviously. And back then, I mean, the Bahamas, if any of the listeners have been there, it's out there. It's pretty far out. Well, where we lived was really far out in the islands. And again, it was in the 80s. So that was scary. And when she came back from that, she had a sense of like insecurity. Like, she had seen a holistic doctor and she was doing well, but she had this sense of insecurity. And so my dad was like, we've lived this nomadic life for this long. I was about to turn 13. Sorry. I was about to turn 13 and my dad was like, "Okay, maybe I should like let my wife have that white picket fence thing if that's what she wants to try." And my dad was like, "I don't know. I have 2 girls, they're going to be teenagers and it's pretty sheltered out there." Sheltered in a sense of like, Dad wanted us to have the best of both worlds. Like, he wanted us to know what a mall was like, because that was big, right? In our time in the 80s and early 90s. He wanted us to know current music, so we could be quote unquote cool, and kind of know the normal things, like go know what a Walmart is or how to really live in different societal situations. So that was the initial. So we moved to North Florida because my parents were familiar with that area. And then here we are. It's 1992. We're on 5 acres in the woods, and we have home videos of us in our bathing suits with our ducks in the yard, because we literally are like, we live in our bathing suits. Like, where's the water? And I was like, I want to be normal. I want to go to school, because we had seen like 90210 or something like that. And so my dad was like, ugh, he's very anti the system, But again, he's like, what are you going to do if you're going to homeschool? And I think this is a good takeaway. So listen up, mamas and daddies. If you're going to homeschool, you have to be doing something with your children. There has to be something else going on. I think it would be difficult. I'm not saying don't do it, but I think it would be difficult to homeschool in a neighborhood where your children are the only homeschooled children, and the only things for them to do outside of school for those 2 hours is video games or watching TV. There has to be, you have to have a garden, you have to have hobbies and things for them to do. So back then, we didn't have homeschool co-ops. We didn't have things for us to get involved in. So the kids in our area, we're a very rural area, they were all going to school. So my dad made the difficult decision. He put us in public school. And I remember it was the middle of 7th grade. Now, my sister had never been away from me. Oh, I have to digress. I went to school for a second in third grade. I forgot about that. But I'll continue. So my sister had never been away from me. I'm put into public school. My sister goes to the elementary school. I go to the middle school. I'm crying my eyes out. My little sister's like, "Hey, this is cool. Let's go check this out." I'm like, "You're taking my sister away. You're separating us. I don't want to be normal anymore." But I did it. And then my experience in the classroom was difficult because I went from, and I don't even know if it was just the one-on-one, but it was the curriculum change. The textbooks are different. And I remember looking through and like, I don't know how accurate this is, but this is just a memory. Like the answers were in the back of the book, like the glossary or whatever, like for the vocab words or something were in the back of the book. And I was kind of looking around like, did you guys know the answers were in the back of the book? Like in my book, you had to read the whole chapter to get the answers to the question, So I'm like, well, that's weird. And so I'm going to go back real quick because I forgot I had a little stint of third grade. We were in the Keys and my mom had a moment where she was like, maybe she needs to be socialized and go to school. And it's weird to say this now because my parents are so not like this anymore. But I went to third grade for like 3 weeks and it was awful. And I cried every day. But my mom said, you said, I really want to do this. So I tried to push you and say, honey, you said you want to do this. So I need you to give it a good chance. And I remember crying and the teacher said, Shellbe, come write your name on the board because you're just not listening or something like that. And I was like, I don't know how to write my name on the board. What does that mean? And that's it. That's all I remember from the whole experience. But it was awful. And yeah, so that's a little tidbit of the why we did that.
Yeah, that's got to be a big change. I mean, the curriculum is one thing. How did it work out with the other students? Like, were you able to easily make friends? Did you finish out 12th grade in school?
I did. So, I like I said, I've thought about this a lot and there's a lot of emotion attached to this. So when I was thinking about doing this, I kind of wanted to touch on that a little bit versus just the curriculum side of it, because I came from a country, and I think this might be a little bit valid. I came from a country, primarily a Black country, and then I'm put into North Central Florida, somewhat racist back then. That was very confusing to me, because we are in the South. So that was very confusing. So here I am in school, and it's like everyone that had started sports already played sports. So I wasn't going to be an athlete because I knew how to spearfish and sail and make fires and feed myself, right? But I don't know how to play softball. And then the racism was confusing to me because and I'm going to say this in a very childlike way, okay? When I was like, I don't fit in here. And then I was like, ooh, Black people, you're my family, right? And so I gravitated and I was like, they became my closer friends. However, in this area, that wasn't very accepted. So then I was confused. And then I was confused by this racism that I was encountering. So that was difficult with making friends. I remember feeling embarrassed about my story because it wasn't normal. So I didn't really tell people like where I came from. Also crazy because it's so freaking cool what I experienced.
What is your heritage?
I mean, I just grew up in the Bahamas. Like I'm American, but I just mean coming from
what is your mom and dad though?
They're white Americans.
Oh, okay. So you were encountering racism,
living that alternative lifestyle.
Okay. So you were encountering racism like against you or
from the other
like
side. Mm-hmm.
Really? From the white, because I mean, you definitely have like, a darker complexion, but yeah, I wouldn't, like if you were in my school, I wouldn't even know like, there's white. A Black person, there's a white person. No. So
no.
I was just wondering how, like, who was being the racist and why would they even think that? Because you would think in Florida that it's actually a lot of people coming up from like Cuba and,
Well, I'm in a different part of Florida though. So I'm in North Florida. So that's basically South Georgia. So the reason I bring up the racism was because that was a thing that is taught. And to me, it's an experience that is taught. And when you go through the public school system or you're around other children a lot, like my daughter's, around a lot of different people. I was getting, when I say racism, I mean from like all the black kids hung out together and all the white kids hung out together. And that's just how it
Okay.
was. And so when
Yeah.
I
Okay.
became friends with someone because she sat next to me and I really liked her and we became friends, then it was like, well, like maybe her mom didn't really love that she was hanging out with the white girl and I would go over to her house and that was a little bit weird. Or like, you can't really have a black boyfriend because that's not really accepted here. So things like that. And so then that added on to now I'm in a class of 30 kids. I'm not sure who the hell I'm supposed to be friends with because I don't really know how to, like, I was always very social, but I'm like, I don't know in this situation. So the social aspect was difficult, along with learning the curriculum. And I want to say too that when I like, okay, so I'm learning something like math was always difficult for me in public school. So, you're going along and then I'm like, oh, I didn't catch like A plus B equals C, right? I'm like, oh, I didn't catch what B was. And then the bell rings and they're like, okay, Shellbe, we'll touch on that Monday. Well, now
Yeah.
it's Monday.
You're not from that. Like,
No.
you're like, wait, if I'm in this and learning and need to know, why wouldn't you just tell me now?
Right. And so I couldn't, that made me, I fell behind. I fell behind in that sense. And so then that just kind of continued along. And I also got a little bit defeated where I was just like, nobody's freaking listening to me. Nobody cares. And so then I just was having fun. I was like, wow, look at all these friends. And then I'm making friends. And, but kind of knowing where to fit in also kind of always was there. I think a lot because of just I think maybe people that travel and move schools have the same experience though. I mean, if you move from California to New York, you got to reinvent everything. So that was just my experience. But as far as the schooling goes, that was difficult for me because I could have done better. I know how to learn. I had a great foundation. The system failed me in that sense because I never learned what B was. So how do I learn what A plus B equals C? So then ninth grade, I go into high school and I'm put into like basic pre-algebra or something like that. And I was like, okay, kind of getting it. But, with math, if you never learned what B was, now you can't figure out the problem. And so I just continued to struggle, and just coasted by. And yeah, I mean, I don't know why it's embarrassing to be like, I didn't do very good in high school. But like, I feel like it wasn't my fault.
You said that when you were living on the boat and homeschooling, you loved reading. Did you carry that love of reading into the school system with you?
I did. And I actually loved to read and I loved to write. Like in high school, I was thinking about this again the other day. I had a few like pieces of poetry published in these major like coffee table books. So funny. I was like, it was $50 at the time. And I think, oh God, I wish I would have spent the $50 to buy the book so I could have it. But like I would write things and send it off. But at the time, $50 was like, oh, that's like too much for a book. But yeah, I did. I carried that all the way through and I loved to write. I mean, I had just have notebooks upon notebooks upon notebooks of my writing. It was just the math and it was just a matter of, I just wasn't that interested and I wasn't getting that feedback,
Yeah, because it's not like they say to you in school, okay, well, when the bell rings and I say we'll touch on it tomorrow, who's going to bring it up tomorrow? Is it
Right.
Shelby's job as the student to come in and say, okay, can I take this time now away from the other 29 kids here so that you can explain it to me? Or is it the teacher's responsibility to say, like, let's meet up after school? It's like we never have these conversations in the beginning of the school year to say, like, how this is going to go. And it's the same thing with, that's kind of why I wrote my book, Let's Talk Emergencies, because it's like, nobody is having that conversation in the beginning of the school year of whether it's kindergarten, first, second, third, of like, now what are the parents teaching the kids and what are the teachers teaching the kids? And everyone thinks the other one's doing it.
Right.
So, teachers are like, I'm not teaching your kid your phone number, your first and last name, their first and last name. That's your job. You're the parent. And the parents are like, we're so busy. We send them all day to school. We don't really think about the other stuff that we have to cover. So yeah, that carries on through the high school where when you're homeschooling, it's like, well, I know I'm responsible for it all.
Yeah.
So let's get her done.
Exactly. And knowing where your child is, like where they can not excel, but where they can go a little further, where you can push them, where the other side is like, well, like my daughter's, she's 5 and she's doing kindergarten curriculum with the good and the beautiful, which I absolutely love. I love it. It's so simple. And it's just like you open the book and you do the lesson. It's right there. So when we started, she wasn't really grasping the language arts. It was right before she turned 5. She wasn't really grasping. I'm like, well, it's fine. Like, you don't need, I'm not going to push you. And then math, she would loved it. And so we just were going and going and going and going. And then I introduced the language arts again, and it was right at the right time, because then she was picking up on it. But I read to her. I mean, we read chapter books every night. Every time she's on the potty, that's a new thing that she's always wanted. Come read me a story. I know. I say it like that because I'm like, I could do the dishes while you go potty, and then we could reconvene. And she's like, no, I need a story. I'm like, okay. So I sit on the floor in the bathroom.
Hilarious. I love it. Okay, so you graduated, and what made you decide? Did you go on to college or take a different path?
I did not go to college. Well, I went to the Paul Mitchell Hair Academy, so I will call that college because it costs a lot of money and it's a very prestigious school. So I guess that would be a trade school. So after school, I was in the restaurant business. I bartended. I served for a long time, managed a few restaurants. And then when I was about 25, I decided to go into the hair business. I've always liked to be very independent, have control of my own schedule, and that was an amazing career. Further on, I ended up in the yachting industry. I had my own boat. I went back to the islands on my own boat, and then I got into the yachting industry, and I was a chef on yachts, first mate, and so that was all a really cool transition into
You don't
this.
look old enough to have all these lives.
I needed that today, Cheryl, because I just turned 44. I needed that.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
I know. I'm 41. I hear you.
It's
Everyone's
crazy.
like, it's great, but it's also like every day waking up like you're hungover and you never drank. That's
know.
what 40 is.
I know. And then the perimenopausal, that's a whole nother thing. Oh my gosh. I'm just like, oh, this is cool. I've never had PMS before, but this is a new experience. I wanted to mention too that my sister, my younger sister, she did, I think, 3rd through 8th grade in public school. And she met her lifelong best friend in 5th grade. And they just stuck together like glue, and still are till this day. And so after 8th grade, they both were like, I want to do homeschool. I don't want to go to high school. Shellbe didn't have a great experience. So her parents and my parents allowed them, or gave them, the opportunity to do homeschool for high school. It was cool because they were with each other. So they would do their school in the morning, and they did American homeschool for high school. I don't even know if that's still around, but they did that. And then they both were done with high school by 16, and they went off to trade school. My sister, 16, 17. My sister went into EMT school, which she ended up not doing. She sailed off into the sunset, met her husband, had children. Yeah, so she did not continue with that. But, and then our friend, she became a hairstylist, and still, I mean, she's a stay-at-home mom now, but she did hair up until, so she already had a fully booked client list by the time before she was 19, because she had been doing school, she went to school and everything. So that was a great example too.
Yeah. And I love that idea. That's like, okay, do we have, 2 kids from different families? Well, let's like trade off on how we do things. They have that bonding and the life experiences, to figure out what they want to do as a career. And you both went back to sailing, which is, that must have made your parents so happy.
Oh my gosh.
I love that.
In 2015, my sister and her husband had bought a new boat. My dad had just finished building his 63-foot trimaran, and he had just turned 60. And I was living in St. Pete, and I had a salon, and I was very successful, and I had built up my clientele list, and I was loving it. And my partner at the time, I said, do you want to go get a boat and go cruising with my parents and my sister? Because they're going. Like, they're going to go to the islands, and we're just going to sit here and like go day-to-day work. When I put my mind to something, we can do it. So fast forward about a year later, we bought a 43-foot trawler, and I hopped up there at the helm, and I was like, you throw the lines, I'm going to figure out how to run this baby. And I only hit the dock once the whole time I had the boat, and it was very little nudge. So I ran the boat, and we went cruising. So my parents on their boat, and then we would raft up next to each other. So they had both their babies on either side, which was great.
Oh my God.
My dad got diagnosed with leukemia about 3 years after that. He's still alive and well, but I'm so glad we did that, because he was able to bring his girls back to that environment that he started us in, So that was cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And you wonder, like, you're living this life of, you're not really in the system, and, I'm sure he's eating healthy. How do you get leukemia? Like, I get it with the people that are like,
taking in these processed foods every day and, all the shots that they're giving us and radiation and everything else, fluoride in the water. But here he's not like really living that lifestyle. You wonder.
Well, I'm going to tell you because I'm pretty much an open book and he's not going to listen to this. He did not eat healthy. he he he's one that's like sees the day. So here we are. He was never a heavy drinker, never a heavy anything, but he was always like he'd have a cigarette and he'd have, he'd just smoke till they were gone. He ate whatever he wanted. I think that a lot of it was a lot of processed food, because when you travel like that, like I ran into this when I stocked my boat. When you travel like that, you have to think of shelf stable things. So they were just buying like cans of soups and things. And I remember sitting on his boat one time going, "Oh my gosh, Dad, have you looked at the ingredients in this?" And he's like, "No, baby, you just bless the food," which I agree with. But also I'm like, but there are a lot of like carcinogens in here. He also ate about 125 tubs of ice cream while he was building his last boat. I love the man dearly and he's taught me all the life lessons, but I will not say that he has been an epitome of health. No. He's had one hell of a life, though. I'll tell you that much.
I bet. So you have your daughter. What made you decide to homeschool her?
It was never even a question. Never even crossed my mind. The thought, I think the first thing is the thought of dropping her off somewhere to let someone else, I'm trying to say this very wisely, like my parents said to me, if you, how do they say it? Whatever you don't teach your children, someone else is going to. And so fill them up with what you want them to be filled up with. So I just knew from the moment I just ever thought about having kids, the moment I got pregnant, I was like, I am absolutely homeschooling her. And my sister has a daughter who's 3 years older. So she's a little bit like, she picked out the first curriculum that we used, and it's kind of a normal thing. And my parents are very much against the school system now. And the schools are, even worse than they were back then. It wasn't much of a question. And I knew that I could educate her well. I know that I can. And watching her learn and doing things like, and since this podcast is parents listening going, should I do this? I just want to give an example of, for one, we do school maybe 2 times a week. I mean, she's doing kindergarten, but maybe. And I learned that. I felt more encouraged about that after talking to you on Fearless Motherhood, because you shared, like, how often do we crack open a book? But like the other morning, I'm sitting outside having coffee, doing like some journaling stuff for work. And she's over there with a magnifying glass looking at caterpillars. Well, this is interesting. And she was saying interesting, so cute. I don't remember how she said it. And then she found like 5 different types of caterpillars, got a Tupperware, put all the food for them in there, put a screen over the top. I mean, built this whole habitat for them. She was measuring them with her little measuring tape. So I was like, check, school's done for the day, So that's a lot of what we do. And then, of course, like any other mom, I have these moments where I think, oh my God, should we be further along in this book? Like, should I be doing this more? And then we sit down and I'm like, okay, sound these words out and see if you can read it. I'm like, okay, so this is a vowel. And she's like, I know, A-E-I-O-U and sometimes Y. And I was like, where the hell did you get that from? And then she's like, the reading is just coming along super fast. And we're literally on like the 4th lesson in the kindergarten, language arts. We do so many things, or we're driving in the car and I'm talking to her about time. I think I also learned that from you. I ask her math problems all the time. Last night at bedtime, I'm like, what's 40 plus 10? She's like, I don't know. And I was like, okay, well, put up your fingers. And then she just counted. And then I said, what's 40 plus 5? And she goes, 45. And then we just kept running through it. And I'm like, we're getting ready for bed. So we're doing that all of the time. I'm pushing her to spell words. I'm pushing her to use her imagination. Oh, that's
that's actually most relevant in her world. So it makes so much more sense to her, why she would have to know that. Yeah, my son wanted to buy something off of Amazon today. So I was like, okay, well, let's write down the amount that it is. Now I want to show you how we calculate tax, where I could have just gone to the checkout screen and showed him, but I was like, get out your calculator, we're going to write this in, and we're 8%. So I don't know if that's how it works on Amazon, but it was a good way to show them like, this is how we would calculate tax. Now we got to add these two up. And he was taking the money out of his piggy bank, so he was minusing it from his little total. And it's like, so all that takes 20 minutes, but that's a math lesson. Just because it didn't go in exact order, it was relevant to his life for what he wanted to do at that time. So that's why it was
life
important.
Experiences.
Yeah.
The other night the other day for my birthday, my 8-year-old niece was like, "How old are you?" And it was great because my mom, my dad, my sister are there. Everyone paused. No one answered the question. And I said, or my sister said, "Well, she was born in 1981. And so my niece is just looking at her like, okay. And so she grabs a piece of paper and says, "Figure it out." And I don't know what she knows. I think she's in 3rd grade. So we're like, okay, this is the year 2025, do the subtraction. And she's carrying. And I look at my sister and I go, "She knows how to do that? Is that how you do that?" And I was like, this is really awesome. And so she goes, "Oh, you're 44. And I was so impressed. But like everyone in our environment were like, "Give her a second. Just see if she can figure this out." Why not? Just try. Just see if she knows how to do it. And I was
That's
really
so
impressed.
important. Right. Not just quickly answering. I remember my sister would always answer, like if I'd ask her kids something, she'd answer for them. I'm like, let them speak. It's good for them. And they're all very quiet kids now. So my kids, not quiet at all. So there's a trade-off to like, if this is good or not, but I do let them answer questions when adults ask them things.
And it's the answers can be so entertaining. We're driving along the other day and Selah says to me, "Oh, I just saw one of those, what are they called?" And I was like, "Well, what, like, tell me about it. What do you mean?" She goes, she said, "I'm just going to say it like it is." She's 5. "I'm just going to say it like it is." I said, "Okay." She goes, "Dead people." And I said, "Oh, a cemetery." Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So anyways, I just saw one of those and I was like, "Oh my God, that was so cute." So I'm just going to say it like it is. Dead people.
Oh,
But I didn't start coming up with 1,000 suggestions. I just let her think. And it's so cool when you do that because then you get these funny things that come out of their mouth.
I think that's a very good takeaway too, to like give them that moment to let them process it and say what is on their mind. Because then a question will automatically come out of that too. And that's so cool. Now, the question I get a lot of times, 2 different questions. So you're a single mom and you have an only child that you're homeschooling. So first question, people always ask me like, or will say, "Oh, I would homeschool, but I can't. I'm a single mom. I have to work." So how do you make that work?
Well, good question. Back to we only do two days of school, maybe every week. I'm really in a fortunate position because I have my sister and our best friend right down the road. So there are times for my work, I'm a holistic life coach. I also am a hairstylist, so I do have some clients that come to my house. So both of those things are kind of fluid with, if I need to cancel, I need to reschedule. So I've created my income, my job to be flexible so that I can do that. So there are times when she'll just go to my sister's house when I have to work. But as far as homeschooling, you asked me this before, and like the difference of just with one child, it is, I would say, maybe easier because it's just, I can stick to what she's into. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
And you're not obviously too worried about the socialization aspect. There's a lot more. Well, first of all, because of how you grew up, you know how to converse with people. You had your sister and you had books. There was always adventure. It's not like you were like locked in a basement. I think that's what they think homeschoolers are, and now there's just so many more things, whether you want to do a co-op or want to do a play group or want to do, there's so many places to meet homeschoolers. So and obviously with your sister right nearby, homeschooling, it's like, there's just so many opportunities now. It's really not a concern, I take it.
Well, and as far as the socialization, so when I was growing up on the boat, we hung out. We were very social. I mean, my dad is a musician, so he's always playing guitar. I mean, I spent countless hours in tiki bars on the beach around bonfires. I mean, there were people coming and going, other kids on sailboats. So we lived in Jamaica for a little stint too. So I had a lot of, Jamaican influence and a lot of friends there. So there was definitely not a lack of socialization. but we hung out with a lot of adults. And so the way I look at that is I'm not raising a child, like I'm raising an adult. So I want to, expose her to a lot of different people. And so she can converse with an adult very easily. And my parents said that we were like that too. Like people would come to the Bahamas and I would we'd take them in our boat and say, oh, this is the kind of fish we catch here. This is this island. Which is cool that later in my life, I worked on charters on yachts in that same space in the Bahamas. So as we're sailing down the islands, I'm giving the tour of like, oh, this is the island I grew up on, and this is where you get this. That was really cool. But a lot of socializing. And then, yes, we have, my sister has 2 daughters, and then our best friend has 2 daughters. So there's 5 girls. I mean, she is barely an only child. She has 2 little ones following after her, stealing her things, we have ages 8 all the way down to 2. So she's very much barely an only child. She has lots of adults. She just spent 2 hours with my mom and her friend at my mom's house because she just wanted to hang out with them. So she didn't even want to hang out with me. She was hanging out with the adults or the older adults.
So, all right, what would be your parting words of advice or encouragement to the parents that want to homeschool, but it's a scary step? They might think they have to quit their job. They might think that their kids are just going to be weird. What would you say, or what sort of words of advice do you have to them?
As far as being weird, someone said to me once, so there were no weird kids in your public high school? And I was like, oh, that's a really good one. That's a really good point. So I have never met I don't think I've ever been a weird, quote unquote, I don't even know what that even means, right? Homeschooled kid. I mean, all the kids I've met that are teenagers and in their early 20s that were homeschooled are dynamic. They've done so much where I'm like, holy moly, this is awesome. So again, back to what I said, do something with them. Get them involved in something because school's going to be done quick. Curriculum's going to be done quick. Go work on a farm, learn how to garden, get outside. That's the most important. If you're going to just put them in front of the video games because you have to work afterwards, then try to figure something else out. Also, I would say reach out to other moms in your area and homeschool groups in your area. And someone had mentioned this at one point, maybe on a podcast I listened to. Those other moms are eager for you to homeschool your child too. So if you reach out and say, hey, I want to pull my kid out of school. Can you help me? Like, is there anything? And they would be like, yes, I'll take the kid a couple days. You take my kids a couple days or whatever. And maybe you even said that, Cheryl. I might be quoting you. But yeah, that would be my recommendation. And this is blunt, but it's a scary world out there. And I can't imagine. I mean, feel like you're pretty transparent and blunt on your podcast, but I can't imagine watching the news and seeing a school shooting and then getting up the next morning going, have a good day, bye. There's no friggin' way. So
yeah, those always it's so backwards because people are like, well, it never happens. And then it's like, well, then why are you training them for combat basically like 3 times a year in school to do these things, which the event of the practice, I think is traumatic enough.
Absolutely.
The fact that mommy sends you to some place where we have to practice what would happen if you were to have a shooter come after you. We don't practice this in the grocery store. We don't practice this at the mall. We don't practice this at Chuck E. Cheese. So why? And then we just send them every day and pay the taxes.
Right?
It's crazy. Right? Nobody just stops to think about it. Like, why would I send my kid somewhere where I'm not going to send them into, the military right now because I don't want them getting attacked. So why would we send them to a place where that's terrifying. And if it doesn't happen often enough, where if they just say, oh, it never happens, the statistic is so low, then why have these trainings for it?
We can go into the statistics of vaccinating too. I mean, I'm pretty passionate about that subject. I was told once, if you walked into a party and there were 1,000 cupcakes and one of them had arsenic in it, would you let your kid pick a cupcake off the table? Hell no. So there's your statistics, right? And back to the advice, because I know we have to wrap up. I want to say, just trust yourself and know that you're going to make the right decisions. And the curriculum is made for homeschooling. So it's different. It's different than what they're getting in public schools. So go on to the good and the beautiful if your child is in that age range. Talk to some other homeschool parents, reach out, and just try it. I mean, it's the absolute best thing you can do for your child. I really believe it really is. And And I will use this quote from another podcast. She said, "This is the inconvenient truth." I'm going to say the inconvenient truth. Is it your child and their well-being or your career? Make some changes, because I'll tell you, and I know that's a blunt statement. That's why I'm using her inconvenient truth, but I live a very simple life because I will not go get a 9 to 5 so that I can be more financially comfortable and send my kid to school. I won't. Every month, I figure out how to pay for what I need to pay for because I am not going to take time away from her. And that includes, I started a cleaning business and I was like, I'll go clean houses. That's great. I could take her with me or da 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 da. A couple of times I had to cancel because she's sick. I'm not leaving her when she's sick. No brainer. So I stopped the business, even though it was making good money. It was just not, I'm not going to do it. So to me, I think it's just priorities. Sorry, that's kind of blunt, but
yeah, these priorities are ingrained in us, and you really have to stop and think why you're doing what you're doing. Why are you sending your kid to school? Why are you going to sit in a cubicle or whatever it is all day? And is there any other way? We're just not, school doesn't teach us to think outside that box. So it's kind of like these podcasts and conversations like this to help urge people to think outside that box. And Shellbe, where can people find you if they want to follow you or see what else you're up to? Go ahead and let us know.
Thank you. So you can find me on Instagram at Island Fever, or Vital Roots Holistic Life Coaching is my business. And this falls under the umbrella of my holistic life coaching, because obviously holistic is everything. So that's everything from, I want to homeschool my kid, but I don't know where to start. So the first thing I would say is go listen to the Homeschool How-To podcast with Cheryl. And then let's talk, and we'll talk about curriculum, and I'll help you. So that's one of the things I offer in my holistic life coaching course. So yeah, Vital Roots, or just look me up, Shellbe, Shellbe. So, and I'd love to help. Thank you for having me, Cheryl.
Well, yeah, I will link all that in the show's description. Shellbe, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been such a fun conversation.
Thank you.